This presentation is titled Social Media for the Nutrition Professional for Nutrition 410. My name is Kristen Rigsby. I'm a doctoral candidate here at the University of Tennessee in the graduate program. I've recently done research on social media usage in college students, but today we will be discussing how social media can influence the nutrition professional. So, are dietitians on social media currently? I'm sure you are all well aware that dietitians are all over social media. In October 2015, the Today's Dietitian magazine reported that there were nearly 65,000 RDNs on LinkedIn and 863 dietitian blogs on the Nutrition Blog Network. Almost 200,000 users have liked the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics Facebook page, and the Eat Right Twitter account has over 50,000 followers. However, these statistics don't even touch the surface of dietitians and the role of nutrition in today's. But as all of you, I'm sure, are well aware, the role of the dietitian in social media does not even compare to non-scientific sources of nutrition that all of us are exposed to every day on social media. So, what is social media? Well, social media in general is a fairly broad term and seems to constantly be evolving based on new technologies and new ways that we interact with persons online. Basically, social media has revolutionized the way we interact with human beings. It can refer to any website or application that allows people to share user-generated content, personal messages, images, videos, or even collaborate in real time. Now, social media is often used interchangeably with the term social. Some examples of social media include Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Reddit, and Tumblr. Further sources of social media are listed on this slide. However, I'm sure this list doesn't even begin to capture the evolving forms of social media that we use daily. It is important to note that there is a difference between simply having a social media account and being an active user. Did you know that LinkedIn was the first social media site to launch in 2003? It was followed shortly after by YouTube, then Facebook. Now, this slide provides us with some examples of how widely used social media is and how that has exponentially grown in the last decade. So in 2005, as many of the social media sites such as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter were just starting to emerge on the scene, there was a reported use of only 8%. Now, in under 10 years, the reported use of social media was up to 72% globally. Even more amazing, 1/7 of the world's population is considered to be a Facebook user. And social media is not just limited to millennials or young people. Use is prevalent across all age groups, professions, and so now that we know how much social media is being used, how often is it being used for health information? Well, more than 40% of consumers have been reported as finding health information on social media credible sources. Even more amazingly, 90% of people in our age group report that they would trust medical information that was shared on their social media sites. Now, this number seems very small to me, but the particular statistic I found about how many smartphone users have a health-related app on their phone was only 19%. However, with Apple and Android both having built-in health monitors on new telephones, I'm sure the number is much higher. Interestingly, we know that people go to social media for health information, but as part of the Get Fruit project, I analyzed some data and presented it as research about how college students thought that the health information on social media actually changed their food purchases and the way they thought about nutrition. And interestingly, even though they reported using social media heavily for health information and health promotion, they thought that it had little to do with why they chose certain foods over others. Now, I beg to think this is a little bit different than that. However, their perception of how social media affects them is still a very important piece of evidence. Everyone has a social media footprint that has interacted on social media. It is important to remember always that no matter how anonymous it seems, it is public. And you should never put anything online that you wouldn't be okay with everyone seeing, including future employers. Now, if you're talking about professional forms of social media communication with clients, you have to remember that you have to be consistent with your messaging. And also, it never goes away. Often your online social media presence stays with you for a long time. And there can be good, bad, and ugly ways to use social media as a healthcare professional. So, what are the good ways we can use social media? Well, we can use social media to provide. This can be done in many different formats, such as connecting people to services and resources that they need, help promoting behavior change through goal setting, providing social support. Things like Weight Watchers have had amazing luck with their online forums for people who can't attend meetings, and also promoting nutrition events, other nutrition practices, and even other healthcare professions. We know that social media works because of social influence. There are many theories that we utilize in nutrition to explain how to provide nutrition education or promote behavior change. And a lot of it relies on how social interactions actually influence behavior. These can include social cognitive theory, the theory of planned behavior, the health belief model, socio-ecological model, social ecological theory, etc., etc. But in general, we know that those social aspects influence behavior. So there is a direct relationship with social media and behavior change in the individual. Further, peer-to-peer support is especially important with behavior change sometimes. We know this is why Weight Watchers works sometimes for people because there's that created social support network with counseling and groups. This can also be achieved through social. So, what are the benefits of social media in individual behavior change, specifically for nutrition? Well, it's a wonderful, cost effective way to reach your target populations. I mean, you have the potential for going viral and affecting millions of people. Imagine how long that would take between in person individual counseling. One thing that I was always concerned about with using social media was access to low income populations. However, recent research has shown that most Americans have access to the internet through smartphones. So this is less of an issue than it was previously. Also, we know we have continuous access to people through social media 24/7. Now, whether that's good or bad, it can be helpful in some cases for nutrition education. And then there's also accidental exposure. So, if someone that you're working with shares a post that you have, you could reach all kinds of people that you maybe necessarily didn't intend to reach out to or anticipate originally. Also, we know that sometimes use of social media is a preferred platform for some people. We may be able to connect with people who are unlikely to come into the clinic or the hospital to see us. And on a personal note, it provides increased visibility to you as a nutrition expert and to us as a field to be recognized as nutrition experts. Now, what are some strategies to increase social media presence, especially professionally? Well, we need to design it with our target audience in mind. We need to keep it current and updated. Find key stakeholders, find people that support you. Keep your names consistent and easy. Continue to use the same hashtags. People really love personal stories. They're much more likely to read personal stories than an article that you did. So, potentially think about using your own pictures or using pictures for your target audience. And remember, consistency is key. You must continue to stay with the same strategy in mind. One of the best ways to do this, and we're actually going to practice this in class, is to sit down before creating a social media presence and think all of these things out. What differentiates you? What's your target audience? What are your goals with your social media presence? So, despite how well you can plan for your social media presence, there can still be some potential problems. You have to worry about diverse opinions and providing incorrect information. You have to worry about potential cyberbullying. Anonymous comments seem to be a huge problem with blogs and posts. Now, the old saying that any press is good press is not true for a healthcare professional. So, bad public relations can be a serious issue. You do not want to be known as the quack nutrition expert. There is value in brand, and that goes back to that consistency and branding and thinking about your strategy way before you put things out. And there's that problem with there being a transient amount of people that are interested. You don't ever know if you're engaging with the same people constantly, which would be the optimal thing. That everyone that sees one post of yours is going to see every follow up post. But we know with social media that you follow people, then you unfollow people, and it is a transient thing. So know that going into it. All right, let's think about the bad things that can happen with a professional or personal social media presence. And this can include major privacy and confidentiality. I'm sure many of you are well aware of some of the risks of social media, but specifically when thinking about being a healthcare professional and a nutrition professional, we have to really think about privacy for our clients. And social media is not an appropriate platform for individual counseling. We cannot expect for that to be a good place because you cannot maintain privacy. And then we also have to think about HIPAA. We have to think about the fact that we can't say anything about having any type of patient on social media because even if the name or identifiable information isn't on there, you never know who might see it that might know who you're talking about. And at that point, you have breached confidentiality. And having social media and having that personal presence sometimes, there can be some pretty slippery boundaries there. And so you have to be prepared and know how. So, to try to minimize some of these risks that could happen with social media presence, I went back to the CDR Code of Ethics provided by the Academy to think about some of the principles that specifically applied to social media usage. So, here we have listed a few principles. one of which being that we should always promote high standards of practice. One I think that could be especially important with social media is not engaging in false or misleading practices or communications. Confidentiality, big one, and so that even is included on. And you have to know that no matter what type of field you go into as a nutrition professional, you have a lifelong responsibility for personal competence in your practice. You must have professional standards, and you constantly need to be applying them to your practice. And that definitely applies to social media. You need to check yourself and make sure that the information you're providing, personal or private, if it's in the nutrition realm, that you are providing the best information you can. And make sure that you are aware of any conflicts of interest that could happen. Friending patients on Facebook, that could end up being a huge conflict of interest. Now, here are some recommendations based on those principles to avoid some of these privacy pitfalls. Once again, social media is not an appropriate platform in any capacity for individual counseling. And we don't want to share any patient information. Like I said previously, even if you share a story that doesn't have any identifiable information, you never know whether somebody that you know is going to read that and know what patient you're talking about. If they can identify what patient you're talking about without you having to say it, you have breached confidentiality. And don't gain a false sense of security with your personal social media presence, because once you leave that digital footprint, you never know how it can be used by other people, how it'll be shared. You just can't control those types of things. Don't post anonymously. There's actually a particular story about why this can be problematic as a healthcare professional. In 2009, one of the CEOs of Whole Foods actually ended up being sued for defamation by their competitor, Wild Oats, because this particular CEO got on many different social media sites and posted anonymously about how wonderful Whole Foods was and how terrible Wild Oats was. And even though it was anonymous, at some point the truth came out and they found out it was the CEO. Not only did he lose his job, he got sued. So even when you're posting anonymously, assume that somebody will figure out who you are. Just don't do it. And you should check your online presence regularly. Now, there's no set time period that you should do this, but I would recommend doing it before job searches, before applying to graduate school, before any major change where you think people might interact with you and wonder about the types of things that you've put online. One way to do this is Google yourself, and we're going to do that in class. Okay, now let's get to the ugly stuff. Your personal privacy, opinions, and how you can endorse certain products. So, unfortunately, as professionals, there is often a blur of what is personal and professional online. And sometimes personal posts could conflict with corporate culture. I'm sure many of you have heard stories about how servers at restaurants have posted terrible things about, somebody that didn't leave them a tip and then lost their job. I have also heard about nurses in particular hospitals that have complained about staffing or scheduling and not even named anyone in particular and lost their job. So it's very important to know that yes, you have an opinion and that's okay, but it's when you're a professional, social media may not be the best place to display that opinion because once again, now endorsements are a very important thing to consider as a dietitian because there are certain regulations that we need to abide by. Once again, transparency is key. If you are being paid in any way to endorse a product, you must be absolutely transparent about that. And actually, the Federal Trade Commission requires that you do that. So if you have blog posts, if you even review something on Amazon, if you got the product for free, if you were provided with any type of compensation, coupons, anything, you have to actually state that before you provide a review. And you must use integrity in a review process despite your compensation. And be upfront about whoever is paying you to endorse the product ahead of time if that makes you feel more comfortable. That you accepting their compensation does not necessarily guarantee. So that kind of leads you to the question of, oh, if there are so many regulations, is this something I should consider in the future? Well, don't let the FTC guidelines discourage you. Many corporate companies hire RDNs as a science based expert, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Once again, it can increase our visibility as being nutrition experts. We just have to remember to be scientific in the evidence that we provide, professional, and honest and accurate in our endorsements. Make sure it's something that you would actually purchase for your own home and eat. Make sure it's something that you would tell your clients to go buy. And even if you stay with these recommendations, this practice has still remained pretty controversial in our own field. So, for example, the use of Pepsi or Coke at Fancy, people still get really upset about that because they feel like we shouldn't be promoting those types of products. So do keep that in mind so that you may come under a little bit of pressure. But once again, as long as you're transparent and honest, that's the best thing you can do, and it's a So to review, dietitians are a strong force on social media today. And the ways that you can interact on social media as a nutrition professional is to make sure to select the appropriate platform for your message. So there are many different social media sites. Make sure that the type of message you're providing is appropriate on that platform. And as always, promote scientific based information, following all legal and ethical standards when you can. This especially comes up when maybe you're using other internet information. So make sure you cite other sources or copyright your own original. The Academy actually provides a nice social media checklist to help you make sure that you are following all of these things that we've recommended. So, if you do decide to develop a social media strategy and move forward as a nutrition professional doing this, make sure that you go back to the Academy's documents on social media and lastly, I provided references for a lot of the things we talked about today, specifically noting the 3 journal articles from the Academy in the middle there that will help provide you with some information about social media further.